So, we are at the closing of the conference, and dear colleagues and dear friends, on the behalf of the scientific and organizing committee, I would like to thank all of you for your participation and active engagement in this conference, which contributed to make it a very important and special event. The diverse perspective, cultural background, and pedagogical expertise that each of you brought into the discussion, taking place both in parallel symposia and during informal exchanges over the breaks, enriched and deepened the reflection on the themes of children's rights and social justice that were at the very core of this conference. The enthusiastic reply of academic and professional colleagues to the call for paper, nearly 1,000 proposals were received this year, revealed that those themes are indeed perceived as being compelling within contemporary pedagogical debate on early childhood education and care, although they might remain rather overlooked in mainstream fora. Despite nearly 70 years have passed since the UN Convention on Human Rights was signed, and nearly 30 years have passed since the UN Convention on Children's Rights was ratified, the pathway to the full implementation of the principle declared in such documents is still a long way ahead. Too many are the dramatic examples attesting how children's rights are systematically violated and neglected at the frontiers of Europe as well as in the countries we are living in. And it is precisely for this reason that we are convinced now more than ever of the necessity and urgency of holding on children's rights not only as the paradigm orienting our research and practice, but also as an ethical foundation of our everyday work with children, family, and practitioners. In this sense, the principle declared in the UN Convention on the Right of the Child can become the cultural and pedagogical frame of reference for developing and nurturing educational projects in which children themselves, as competent human beings and experts of their own life, are the protagonists of learning and socializing experiences. In this perspective, everyday educational work with young children is no longer to be understood in function of predetermined outcomes that they are supposed to achieve in order to become skilled workers and integrated citizens in the future. Rather, by recognizing children's agency here and now, the diversity and richness of their individual and collective potentialities become the starting point of any educational initiative. But what does it mean in concrete terms to translate the principle of an authentic child-centered pedagogy into practice? For us, it means adopting a caring and a responsive approach that make use of ongoing observation, intentional planning, and documentation as powerful tools for giving voice to children, to their needs and aspirations, to their interest and curiosity for learning, and to incorporate these into educational practices as driving force for transformation. I think the previous keynote illustrates this very well. With specific reference to the field of early childhood education and care, children's right to participation can therefore be fulfilled through active listening, through the organization of a learning environment that encourages children's exploration and expression in multiple languages, and through fostering of meaningful relationship with adults and peers that nurture children's sense of belonging within their community. However, the implementation of such principles into everyday practices becomes possible only if we assume at the core of our pedagogical intentionality the idea that children are not the citizens of tomorrow, but the youngest citizens of today, bearing the right to participate and actively shaping the life of the cultural and social community where they are living in. Whereas child-centered approaches are increasingly being claimed as a pedagogical frame of reference for sustaining good practice in early childhood education and care, very often the contexts where such approaches should be implemented do not allow their actualization. This happens, for example, when early years curricula are narrowly focused on the achievement of predetermined outcomes and their assessment, when practitioner working conditions do not allow children's intentionality to emerge and to be taken seriously into account, but it also happens when the access to early childhood education and care provision is hindered by economic as well as cultural barriers. In this sense, the multiple crises, including the economic and the social crisis we are facing today, are a call for action for all of us who are committed to children's rights and who are responsible for their actualization within early childhood education institutions and beyond them. How can children's universal rights can be fulfilled and meaningfully realized in educational contexts that are characterized by sociocultural diversity and increased complexity? This is indeed a compelling question for many early childhood professionals of our time, researchers and practitioners alike. And answering such question is even more challenging because it recalls our responsibility to make concrete choices and to take decisions. But we are also convinced that the thought-provoking contribution from the keynote we have the privilege to listen at this conference gave us inspiration and guidance for dealing with such complex questions. In the first instance, we learned the importance of being aware of those paradigms and discourses which are underpinning research and policies in the field of early childhood education. In fact, only by critically analyzing the rationale underpinning reform trends in policy and research, and by connecting them to the local context where early childhood services are operating, we can take an ethical stance against those approaches that tend to marginalize and silence the voice of children and family in the public debate. And we also learned that our commitment and civic engagement as researchers and professionals belonging to the international early childhood education community could make the difference. Secondly, we learned that enhancing practitioner professionalization and ongoing development is crucial for nurturing the critical reflection over the educational practices enacted on a daily basis in early childhood services. In this sense, praxeological research and participatory action research become fundamental strategies for allowing educators and teachers to rethink enacted practices in a perspective that value co-construction as well as diversification of pedagogical approaches by engaging in a constant dialogue with children, families, and local communities. All in all, the inspiring contribution of the keynotes and of the many presenters within the conference made us aware that the commitment to social justice in early childhood education implies a proactive role of educators, teachers, and researchers as advocates of children's rights. Concretely, this means engaging in ethical relationship with children and family by constantly questioning our assumption and challenging our judgment. It means being open to embark on a learning journey with them. And last but foremost, it means to create the condition for the diversity of voices and for divergent perspective to be heard and to be taken seriously into account. I would like, therefore, to conclude my address with a quote from Bruno Ciari, who was the first pedagogical coordinator of municipal early childhood service in Bologna and was already mentioned several times within this conference. He used to say that children cannot stand for their rights if they are left alone. It is therefore the responsibility of critically reflective teachers, parents, and citizens to support them in this struggle. The future of the world increasingly depends on the school and early childhood institution that we will be able to create, whether or not we will be able to nurture and enhance the humanity of humankind against the brutality that is threatening. The pedagogical utopia that drives our efforts is building a world that is more just and peaceful for all. Thank you. And now I would like to call on stage Melis, which is the Vice President of the ISERA organization. Melis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't go far.